If you thought Mulan was just another Disney 90s classic live-action remake, you are sorely, sorely mistaken. This movie is so political and it has so much to do with China versus the US and basically the future of Hollywood. This is Q&A, but Canadian. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Cheyenne. If you're new here, I make social and political commentary videos, and today's question is, what is Disney's motive with Mulan? Originally, I was actually really excited about the Mulan remake just because it's one of the few Disney classics that aged well. Her whole story of pretending to be a guy to get into the army and then actually winning the war only to reveal that she's a woman, that storyline was super progressive for the 90s, and it's still very much a storyline that could resonate today. But then when I took in all of the changes that Disney was making to Mulan, like, you can't even call it a remake anymore. This is like a whole new Mulan. Mulan was supposed to be released in March, but COVID ruined that. So now it's getting released in September on Disney Plus, in Canada and the US at least. So this sort of streaming release of a major blockbuster movie kind of seems like it'll be something that continues past COVID, just because Canadians and Americans in general are staying home to watch movies instead of going to the movie theaters. However, in China, it's still very popular to go to the movie theaters, and they actually have more cinemas than Canada and the US combined. So it used to be that Hollywood could just make a movie, have it released in the States, and make enough money from the box office to cover its production costs. After that, it would show it in Canada and the rest of the world and make extra profits. Now that movie theater attendance in North America has dropped, Hollywood has to look to international box offices to make enough money from ticket sales to cover its production costs. And it just so happens that the fastest growing box office is China. But China's a little tricky to deal with because you can't just show any type of movie in a Chinese movie theater. And this is where the politics of a movie like Mulan gets started. Back in the 1990s, China decided that it was going to open itself up more to the world. So open itself to foreign investment and foreign trade. So America was very supportive of China opening up to the whole world because the going theory was that if China became more capitalist, then they would become a democracy. This was very important to America because China is very close to Russia, which is a communist country. So if China can become more capitalist and democratic like its neighbors Japan and South Korea, then that would be beneficial to the US interests. So Hollywood plays a role in this as well, because watching movies isn't just a form of entertainment, it's also a form of soft power. So there's obviously one type of power, which is like the US military that can go into countries, topple governments, bomb people to submission, whatever. But then you have soft power, which is Hollywood. And they just make interesting and entertaining movies that get people thinking more like Americans instead of their own culture. For instance, instead of marrying the guy that your family picked out for you before you were born, you're gonna go marry somebody that you love because you value individual rights and freedoms. So back in the 90s, China only allowed 10 foreign films in their cinemas every single year. So in 1995, Lion King made it in and was super popular with the Chinese. So Disney started to look at China as a new and upcoming market. But then this almost fell apart when Martin Scorsese made this film called Kundun, which is about the Dalai Lama. So China thought this movie was politically provocative and almost banned Disney from screening movies in China. But Disney had already made Mulan, and it sort of promoted Mulan as like a way to smooth over these tensions because Mulan is Chinese. But China was petty, and instead of letting Mulan premiere in China like it did in the rest of the world, they held on to it for 8 extra months, and they released it after the Chinese New Year, when everyone was back at work and back in school. So even though the movie didn't do well in the box office and didn't make Disney a lot of money, because the Chinese government took so long to release it, there was a rampant piracy for this movie. So a lot of Chinese people did watch it, even though they didn't watch it in the cinemas. So Mulan was a flop. It did not do well at all. Not only because the Chinese government basically sabotaged their release, but also because the Chinese actually just didn't like it. One of the main reasons why the Chinese didn't like the original Mulan was because they thought she didn't look Chinese enough.
Say what?
Like, she looked too Western for them. And they also thought the movie was way too different from the original story called The Ballad of Mulan. So in the original Disney movie, Mulan starts off by preparing for the matchmaker ceremony. So the ceremony didn't go well, and she ended up bringing dishonor to her family because she wasn't proper wife material. But then the emperor officials come to town and give notice that every household must offer a male to the army to fight the Han invaders. So Mulan's father takes the notice, and at dinner Mulan's like, "Dad, you can't go to war, like, you're weak, you're gonna die." And the father's response is, "You need to know your place and not bring dishonor to this family." And then Mulan sings Reflections, cuts her hair, and runs off in the night to go fight in the army in her dad's place. So when she gets to the military base, she's actually trash at being a soldier, and so they sing, "I'll make a man out of you." So literally none of that is in the original Ballad of Mulan. So when the emperor officials come to her town, Mulan is actually picking rice or making clothing based on whatever variation you're reading. And then when she goes to the military camp, she's actually already trained in combat, so she wasn't a bad soldier at all. She still pretended to be a man, which was the whole point of both stories. But in the Disney movie, when it's revealed that Mulan is a woman, all of her comrades shun her. But in the original Ballad of Mulan, all of her comrades are actually impressed with her and are accepting. So one of the main reasons why the Chinese didn't like the original Mulan was because in Confucian culture, it's looked down upon to put the individual over the community. The community is always supposed to be number one. So even though Mulan went to the army so her father wouldn't have to, it was sort of framed as her breaking away from the patriarchal society and her overbearing family. So did she really go to war for her dad, or did she go to war for herself? So now that Disney is remaking Mulan, they want this to be a massive success in China. Oh yeah, forgot to mention, China censors the shit out of American Hollywood movies. So like I said earlier, in the 90s, China only allowed 10 foreign films into their cinemas every year. But to get into the cinemas, you had to pass their censorship. And if you didn't pass, you couldn't air your movie. So now China allows 34 foreign movies into their cinemas, but you still have to pass their censorship. And as they continue to go to the movies more so than North Americans, China knows that they can push Hollywood to make movies that are China friendly because Hollywood needs China's box offices. So for example, in World War Z, the original book says that the virus might have originated in China, but China forced the production company to censor it and say the virus might have started somewhere else. So another example would be Iron Man 3. So you know in the movie, the villain who ended up not really being the villain, well, in the comic books, he's from China. But in order for Marvel to get that movie into China, they were forced to change that character. So instead of being from China, he was actually just an actor that the actual villain hired to be a villain. So basically, don't say anything, do anything, or show anything that puts China in a bad light. Now, for Mulan, they've changed a lot, but the changes to this Mulan aren't changes that made China look bad. They're actually just things that the Chinese people didn't like about the movie. When I first heard that they took out the dragon, I was kind of like, oh, well, that's kind of shitty because it was a big part of the movie. But if it's cultural appropriation, then like I get it. In the Chinese cultures, dragons are a sign of respect, strength, and power. And this Eddie Murphy dragon was not that at all. So Mushu had to go. They also took out Mulan's love interest from the first movie. So I didn't know this until I started researching for this video, but apparently Li Shang is a symbol for the bisexual community because he liked Mulan when she was pretending to be a guy and also when she revealed herself to be a woman. So obviously with all of the advances made in the LGBT community since the 90s, they could have played up that character, but because China has often censored forms of homosexuality in movies, they just dropped the character. And the other big change that they made that makes the least amount of sense to me is that there won't be any singing or musical numbers in this movie. I don't know if you can have Mulan without Reflections. But then again, Reflections is not in the Ballad of Mulan, so I guess you can. The reason the directors and producers gave for why there are no musical numbers in this Mulan is that they want it to be a more serious warrior type of movie and not like a Disney princess movie, I guess. Honestly, I just feel like they're making this movie for Chinese people, knowing that people who like Disney, people who like the original Mulan are gonna watch it either way. If I'm being honest, part of me is upset because I really just wanted to see the original Mulan in a live action. But on the other hand, I'm sort of like reckoning with the fact that Disney took a Chinese folklore story, made it American, and then tried to sell it back to the Chinese. And it didn't work. So the Mulan that I love is not the real Mulan. And now they're making the real Mulan. That's literally what's happening right now. One of the producers for this movie said that he wants Mulan to be for the Asian diaspora community what Black Panther was for the Black community. And when you look at Mulan in a bubble, like that makes sense. But when you pull back and look at it in the context of Hollywood financing, it's almost like, am I watching a movie that someone just came up with and they wanted to create? Or am I watching a movie that China wants me to watch? But then that just makes me realize that my whole life I've been watching movies that America wants me to watch. So this is all to say that Mulan is not just a Disney live action remake, it is actually an attempt by Disney to create a much closer relationship with China and their censorship bureau, so that Disney can secure more financing for their movies. It's just a good business move. So let me know in the comment section what you think of the Mulan remake and if you're concerned with China's influence on Hollywood. If you like this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.